Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's looking gut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1, the podcast brought to you by KSL Sports, KSL Podcasts. Alex Curie, Dan Jimenez back in the studio again after months of suppositions and wondering and testing and just trying to get by with memes, Dan, to just make us excited about racing. Here we are actually talking about the first race of the season, first race in the books, and it's already freaking over. Here we are. And I'm not going to play the Red Bull 1-2. I think the more interesting spot was this one, of course.
Please welcome back to the Formula One podium for the 99th time, Fernando Alonso, who weaves across the line and celebrates a dream debut with Aston Martin. Alonso heading back to the rostrum, heading back to the podium, having provided us with some phenomenal overtakes along the way.
There was. It was, I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn here, Dan, but I did.
You did call a podium for Fernando.
I called a podium for Fernando, and I gave him that double points boost, I think, or however that works. In our little fantasy
did
league.
You in the fantasy?
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Good choice.
I think that was the only thing that kind of kept me middle of the pack, because I think in the fantasy league you and I are in, are 17 teams or something along those lines, or 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I only have one team that I put together, but I think I'm tied with either your Shag and Wagon account or the Cost Captain. I can't remember which one of yours, but it was an interesting look, because I was like, okay, I thought I did amazing. The people who freaking were dogs for me today were K-Mag, who I was like,
Haas let me down today on the fantasy side,
especially after Hulk gets into Q3, and you're like, they got a quick car here, man. And they fell off the freaking planet today. So out of everything, though, we'll get into all of the stuff that kind of surrounded the race. But I just wanted to get your right off the bat. We don't talk about any of these things until we get right onto the air about it. So your first impressions of race number 1 of the season.
Man, gracias por Fernando Alonso. Like, it was like, without Alonso, that would have been a pretty dry race. He made it exciting. Like, he had some legit green flag passes on Hamilton, on Sainz, on, like, it was great. Like, he had a rough start to the race. It didn't help getting clipped by his teammate in like turn 3 or 4. But after things settled down right there, like, he was the most exciting part of the race. And I think that he's going to be a serious factor going into the next race at Jeddah and through the first part of the season at least. Like, I think everyone is caught off guard with how quick they are, and Alonso is just on it. Like, I just loved his attitude today. He was super like chipper and excited on the radio, and then afterwards on the podium, like, he's at an all-time stoke level. So I thought that was great. Aside from that, it was a lot of similar storylines to the end of last year. Just Max running away with it like half a second to a second a lap to get going. Charles having his engine troubles. It just felt like a replay of the end of last season. But Fernando made it pretty exciting.
Do you think, I mean, Checo was no slouch, but when you're in the same equipment and you finish, I think that the final was, somewhere in the double digit.
He's 12 seconds behind Max, yeah.
I mean, is there a moment where you're like, I am super disappointed in myself? I mean, because second place is nothing to sneeze at, but at the same time, like, that's the same equipment, and this guy, everybody must be looking around and going, well, Checo, it's because you have an amazing car, and you're 12 seconds off of the world champ, and we all know Max is good, but we know Checo's good too, so I don't get how there's such a big disparity. Is that just how good Max is as a racer compared to everybody else, along with the equipment?
Yeah, I do think it's that. Max is the best driver on the grid and the best car, and you combine those two factors, and he just runs away with it. Max got into clean air early on and, was probably able to manage his tires. Sergio had a poor start, lost the position of Charles, like trying to defend on Carlos that came up on the right side on the start. I thought it was a pretty good start by both of the Ferraris. I thought both of the Ferraris were going to get past Checo there, but he held off Sainz. And without the Ferrari failure on Charles Leclerc's car, then he would have finished third. So Sergio's quick, but man, Max he's just at another level.
Let's talk about it. Let's just get straight into this thing. The absolute dog of the day. Let's go two things. So we'll go who sucked as a driver today, who sucked as a constructor today. Where do you want to start? Let's start with your who sucked with the drivers.
Oh man, Ocon.
Oh no!
I mean, one penalty after another. It was pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
That Ocon was pretty terrible. And then on the manufacturer side, I don't think anybody had a worse day than McLaren.
No.
They just were
really
bad.
So there's a reliability thing in there too, right? Because I don't know what was. I think Lando came in and had to have something done with his
pneumatics.
Pneumatics.
So
and that's on top of Oscar Piastri with his most disastrous start to being an F1 possible is getting into the pits and your car just like his battery died.
Blue screen of death on a steering wheel and just.
I think it was. I think it was the alternator.
Recover.
It was an alternator issue probably, but they were.
They said it was engine harness, so something deep down in the electronics of the car that was causing the issue. So when they changed out the steering wheel, why change a steering wheel out on a car? That seems kind of weird. That's where the computer lives on the car, is inside of the steering wheel. So if you're having electronics or computer software issues, then the way to address it is to switch out to a backup steering wheel, and that didn't help. So it was more of kind of fundamental with the hardware of the car than the software.
My dog of the day, driver wise, because I think that Lando is stuck in the thing that he has. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
He just is. I know that he's disappointed. He's been pissed the entire testing and then Piastri. You retire the car. That's one thing. Nico Hülkenberg, for all the things that he was supposed to be doing, maybe I shouldn't go too hard on Hulk just because he's back in F1 again, and I think he's a really, really good driver, and I think that Haas team could be really good. But I think that he starting in 10th and then just finding it just not finding any pace and just falling down, and it was a little bit wild that he was so bad. I'm gonna go with Alpine. I know that Pierre Gasly came back and got some points, but I think that everybody was expecting those guys to be a little bit more buttoned up, and it wasn't that the pace needed to be so good, but yeah, it just seemed like a real. I mean, Gasly was in 20th for a good chunk of the race. I felt like he was back there. He couldn't dig his way back out of the back of the grid. That from a constructor's side of thing, I think that Alpine probably was a letdown in that sense. I'm going to go with, but let's do the guys that surprised us the most, maybe, and not the MVPs of the day, but guys that surprised me the most. I thought Logan Sargent had a really, really good first day.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. He was consistently running highest of all the rookies. He just stayed out of trouble. I didn't ever see any warnings pop up from the race stewards on him exceeding track limits, which was happening with a lot of other guys. And he was battling with Yuki and battled with Alex, and then in qualifying too, he missed out on, he got booted out in Q1, but he ran the same exact time as Lando. And so, he effectively ran the 15th fastest time. And so I'm excited for Logan. I thought that was great. You couldn't ask for a better rookie debut than what he got.
Who was most embarrassed today? Either constructor or driver, either one of those. I've got one in mind for sure.
Gosh, my mind keeps coming back to McLaren, but I think your Alpine observation, I think on the whole for the weekend, Alpine just really underperformed from qualifying to the race. And then Pierre, I think, had a monster heroic effort to pull that thing from 20th to 9th.
To get some points.
I want to hear your dog.
Okay,
who's embarrassed?
I'm going to go.
Who's our embarrassment?
Here's embarrassed, and it's not really because they're third in the constructors championship so far this year, but Mercedes is the works team, and when the customer team rolls up and passes you like that, Toto must be on another planet of embarrassment, right? Because this is a guy who only expects this level of commitment, this level of performance. I mean, the thing that I heard this weekend was that even before they got to the race day, it was that Mercedes was saying, hey, that he told his lead engineers, you need to go back to square one, back at the factory. We're going to get this thing going this year over here, but you guys better start to develop a new car that can actually make us competitive, because 5th and 7th today and being beaten by our customer team, Aston Martin, why don't we make these gains? This should be us. And Ferrari equally had kind of a bad day, except for, Charles probably should have finished second or third himself. But it was, I think that Mercedes – to see Lewis getting past, to have somebody all over the back of George all day, like that is not – there is something going on, and Mercedes must just be because this has everything dialed up to be a really long year for the AMG team.
Yeah, there was a really surprising quote that I'll have to paraphrase, but it's something from Toto where he said, we came into this year still like sticking to our old design philosophy, and it's obvious that it's wrong and we got to start over. Like, that is crazy after race one saying we're off on the completely wrong foot. And so if I'm Toto, I'm looking at my engineering team and be like, if the next version of this car does not look like the Red Bull and the Aston Martin, like, you better have some really good, data to back up why not.
Yeah. Because
there's two cars that have the same exact like side pod profile and they're running in the front. And we have this odd duck that everybody's making fun of and we suck. So you must be some genius if you think that you're no better than Red Bull and Aston Martin right now, that empirically are just like, it's the fastest car.
So I actually, I saw another, I was listening to like, I think a quote that somebody from the Aston Martin team actually brought up, because they were asking about this very thing. They said, when they showed up again and they had their same, the philosophy that they had with the side pods, and everyone went, what's going on here? Why didn't you change it? And the idea was, if they had to start over again, I think that the philosophy was they were going to have to start from somewhere so completely different that it would actually be against something. They'd be comparing themselves against something that they didn't have data on. And so that was like, they have to have this like this comparison is just like, okay, you have 1A and 1B. Which one do you take? And they took 1A, and 1B probably might have been a better option. Now that you look at it and you go, yeah, we're still slower than, they're likely. I mean, the reality is that Ferrari is going to be the second best team, maybe even Aston Martin. But like, Ferrari's the fourth best team right now in F1, and that is a
Mercedes.
Mercedes is the fourth best team in F1 right now, and that's freaking wild.
Yeah, it's crazy after how many years of dominance, 7, 8 years of dominance, to see them in fourth is crazy. And I think it's going to make for a really competitive midfield. Like, I don't know what's going to happen for the number one spot. Max is likely going to, George Russell after the race said that Red Bull is going to win every race this season. Come on, man, don't say that. But
that's how you lower
even if
your
they do,
expectations.
I think that it's going to be really fun and competitive for the rest. And I think like all that's like something about F1 that's different than other sports. Is really, in other sports, we only really care who wins the Super Bowl. And like a few years later, you can't even remember who they played against. Like, it's only about who wins the championship. And I think in F1, that's like where you finish pays different, and what, where you finish will fund development for the next year. And so where everybody finishes second through 10th really matters still. So that's part of being an F1 fan that like you kind of have to get used to, is like, it's not all about who just finishes first.
So how do they pitch that to Fernando? Because, he came back from the summer break, the silly season, right? And he was decided. Sorry, see you guys later. I'm going to Aston Martin. But we were all like, dude, what? Alpine has way better pace right now. They seem to have their stuff together. Is it just because you have some of this butting head stuff going on? What did they show him at Aston Martin? Are they able to show him some some sim stuff to go, this is what we're looking at next year, and this is what we're likely going to be doing, and they could tell him a version of them being in second or third in the fight and him winning a handful of races? Because after this weekend, and even really going into qualifying, everybody knew that Aston Martin was probably the second fastest team on the grid.
Yeah, he knew something the rest of us didn't, because he seemed pretty confident in his decision when the rest of us exactly were thinking like, man, you're leaving Alpine for Aston Martin. Are you crazy? They could have shown him like, hey, our design philosophy for next year's cars is just going to be mimic the Red Bull, and Alonso might have been, okay, hey, great, like let's simplify things. We're just gonna like R&D stands for rob and duplicate in racing, and you just like, okay, let's just rob and duplicate that design as much as we can within the rules, and go for it. And so I who knows, we might find out more as we get into the season exactly what they did, other than just like tell him that and show him a bunch of money. But he definitely made the choice that the rest of us were questioning, and it's turning out for him so far. I think Lance Stroll deserves a lot of credit too.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up.
I mean, the dude like broke both of his wrists, got pins, and then like, I don't know how 8 days later just drove a full F1 race or Grand Prix and finished sixth. I think that's we like to tease Lance a lot. I mean, he's daddy's boy, just getting gifted an F1 seat. I mean, we're all jealous, right? We all wish that we had that chance in life.
Billionaire dad, yeah.
But I mean, I think you got to give credit where credit is due, and I think sixth alone would have been impressive, but doing it with pins in his wrists, I think, is even more. I think speaks to that he is a true racer and has the mentality to go out and win.
I am so disappointed in you, Dan. You fell for all of the PR. You fell for the whole machine that Aston Martin was doing. It's like this became
all part of the plan.
This became his Jordan's flu game. Oh, my wrist. Oh, they got pins in it. And then I watched this whole like back and forth this week on today on the discussion, because he got driver of the day. And Alonso comes over in the garage and says, "You're my effing hero," right? So you have this thing where the guy who was like heroic himself today rolls up and he hugs Lance, and the whole thing with Fernando is he a good teammate? And most of the time the answer is no. But like, he had this moment. Aston Martin ticked all the boxes of like, it's pretty easy when this was like what happened with Mercedes when they were 1 and 2 every freaking race, and they were a lap up on the majority of the field. The third and fourth place, and then everything down to even just the single points that are awarded, we get kind of obsessed with, because we stopped thinking about Max after about lap 30. And so you get this storyline of Fernando, you get the storyline of Lance, and he split the freaking Mercedes today. And you have to be, speaking of guys who are runner-up for my most embarrassed, is probably – if we're talking about Mercedes, is George Russell, who really, I mean, if there would have been another lap too, I think Valtteri would have gotten him. Valtteri was back and forth with Russ today. How freaking hilarious would that have been with the Alpha, climbing all over and then stealing one of those from. And you're going to see it. I mean, I was shocked today to see that. But Stroll, he got the driver of the day. They get the PR win for the weekend on top of the fact that they're second in the constructors' standings. So here are what the points look like from today. Max, did he end up getting fastest lap too? Are we still doing that?
No. Zhou Guan Yu got fastest lap. He came in pitted on the last lap, and he got fastest lap, and he finished 16th. Yeah, so he doesn't get a point because he's not in the top 10.
Yeah, so he doesn't get but you know what? That's a nice little steal one away from the front end. So your points go like this. Your podium was Max and Checo, and of course Nando, and then Carlos Sainz in a fourth place. Quiet day for Ferrari with the DNF on Charles. Lewis was fifth, Stroll sixth, Russell seventh, Bottas eighth, Pierre Gasly ninth, and then Alex Albon stealing some points for Williams. That puts them firmly in the seventh place for the. They're this year's Haas. Remember when they had that opening race last year where they were suddenly like in that they were planted firmly in the midfield and then fell off. I was actually really surprised. Well, not surprised necessarily as much as I was glad that Williams is crawling their way back into not from the very, very, very bottom. I still saw a lot of people saying. Their performance is going to still put them probably in that 9th or 10th place in the constructors. But I love that that both guys, Albon and Logan Sargent, coming in 12th, had a mega weekend, I think, for him. So I was glad to see that Williams isn't everybody's whipping child again. So amazing start for all those.
It was
guys.
During qualifying. I think that Nico Rosberg was commenting on the new team principal. I think Voles, James Voles, I think is his name. came over from Mercedes and worked with Nico when he was at Mercedes, and just think that one of these rising stars in the sport, and just a great strategist and leader. And so good for him for getting points on his debut as a technical director as well, or team principal.
You're the track expert, so let me throw something out there and kind of get you a little bit having to do some late night thinking here as we get. We're going to drop this thing and you're going to get it on a Monday morning, but we're late at work here on a Sunday. So what is the difference between this track and the next week at Saudi? What does that work out to? Like, I know some tracks have different personalities, and these things could benefit some people in some areas, and then the people who you saw perform this week might fall off next. What are we looking for next week then?
Yeah, so Jeddah is a very different track than we were just at in Bahrain. Jeddah is a relatively new track. 2021 was its first Grand Prix. And so I guess this will be our third time racing there. And Jeddah is a low downforce track because they've got these super long straights, or like these kind of winding straight S's. But it's a lot of full throttle. I think of any track on the F1 circuit, you're at 100% throttle the most at Jeddah. And so it's going to be a lot about straight line speed, where we were just at in Bahrain is more of a high downforce track. And so people were running bigger wings, and it was really played into Red Bull's hands. I think Jeddah is going to play more into the hands of folks who have optimized for straight line speed. So Ferrari, Williams also is, for the last couple of years, has consistently been like the lowest drag car. So maybe Williams can get an even better finish, and hopefully both of them can finish in the points. So I'm excited for Jeddah. It's a different type of racetrack for sure. It's a city circuit, but they've built in these really long straights that I think will make for exciting racing.
So I think this, and Jeddah's a little bit more hard. It's harder on the tires, isn't it? Doesn't it eat those tires up too as well? Isn't that kind of the idea, or was that more today that we saw in Bahrain?
And Bahrain is hard, definitely because of the heat, and it's a bit of an older track. I think new tracks can be hard on tires because they haven't rubbered in, they haven't kind of been sanded down by the tires, and so it can be hard on the tires. But like, you get a lot of straight line braking at Jeddah because it's these kind of, think of it, it's like the shape of not even a paper clip, but like a super skinny paper clip. You've got these 180-degree turns on each end, and then like a lot of straights in between. And so straight line braking is not as hard on the tires. When you've got like big, long sweeping corners like at Bahrain or Silverstone, that's when it gets really hard on the tires, because you're putting just a lot of load on side to side on the tire throughout the lap.
What happens? How does Max Verstappen not win the championship this year? Because we're race one out of 23 this year, 22 this year. And I think that a lot of people look at it, and you've already had a cajillion people crowning the guy the champ after race one, and Red Bull far and away above everybody else. Are there enough places to upgrade through the season for some of these teams for someone to be able to catch Red Bull?
I mean, everyone has more wind tunnel development time than Red Bull. So theoretically, everyone should be making more gains throughout the year than Red Bull is. But it's unless it's a reliability issue that pops up, that I'd be surprised that that would be something that Red Bull would have to fight. I mean, if Alonso can get a pole and a win, I think if he can get a pole, he can win. I think he can stand in front of Max. He's quick enough. If he gets a win, I think he can get in Max's head. I think Alonso's the kind of guy that could probably maybe start to take away a little bit of his confidence. And if you can break Max's confidence, maybe then he starts to make mistakes.
I'm going to set the over-under on wins on the season for Fernando at 2.5. Are you going over or under?
I'm going to go under on 2.5.
Does he win one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But is it because
I think one or two?
Is it because it's rainy? So you're not going to give him 3, but 2, you're kind of that hook got you on there. Okay. See, and I think that's probably about the limit. See, I should be handicapping this stuff in Vegas, man. Yeah. Speaking of Vegas, somebody brought up how much it is for the weekend. I think they tweeted it, both you and I, and they brought up an interesting point, and it made me say, you know what? Maybe this is something we have to consider with Dan. It was like the cheapest 3-day pass at Vegas is about $1,700. Okay. So either you and I just go and it's a Saturday Sunday deal, and that's not talking. I mean, that's with staying with a cousin in Henderson, right? and then trying to figure out going to the track. But then they brought up, they go, yeah, but if we flew to Suzuka and did a full weekend, the whole weekend would actually be cheaper than going to Vegas at all.
Yeah. I had another friend who lives in Amsterdam text me and who went with us to the Singapore race. And he was like, hey, man, flights and tickets are cheaper to go to Jeddah than to go to Las Vegas. He's like, do you want to go to Jeddah? I'm like, I got to work. I can't really take a week to go to Saudi Arabia.
See, that's the part.
But these foreign races are a lot cheaper than the domestic ones.
Well, and a ticket's not, I mean, I think it's because it's hard to get people that are far flung. Vegas is going to have a cajillion people who show up who don't even I'm going to get snooty now because I've been a fan of F1 for 5 minutes. A bunch of people who don't really care about the race. They just want to be there to be seen. You know, your Shaqs, et cetera. I don't know. I'm trying to think of Dan. There's homework. You ready? Find the cheapest situation for us. I mean, and if it makes us go into Mexico City, I know you went to Singapore last year, which, by the way, when they had Singapore was featured for like 7.5 seconds of the Drive to Survive season, and I'm like pausing it and I'm like looking for, I'm like that meme of Leonardo DiCaprio, like pointing to the screen, going, "Oh, I think I see Dan right there."
Yeah,
is that him?
I saw that guy? Too. I was like, I was sitting in turn one. I was like, I'm somewhere in this frame for a split second, but a lot of good memories from that weekend. It was so great.
All right, well, that's your. You've got to put together the spreadsheet and figure out the most cost effective. Yeah, because look, if we're headed to Canada, fine, I'm all for it. I'd love to use my passport, but you know, these American races are looking more and more unlikely. Even Austin, everyone's just like, well, you sit for about 6 hours in traffic that race day, 3 to get there, 3 to get out, and I'm like, what? But I know because you come from the land of NASCAR, that's like old hat for you, like just sitting around trying to get out of those stadiums.
Just parking out in a random field somewhere, that is quite the experience of seeing folks stumble their way back to their cars, just sunburned to you know what. I will say that my very first race weekend experience was at Bristol, which is it's like a Coliseum. If you've ever like seen Cars, like I think the opening scene of Cars is kind of like supposed to be the Bristol racetrack. Seats like 120 some odd thousand people, but second the race was over, the guys grabbing me by the collar saying, we got to go. We jump in we literally sprinted out of the stadium to our car to beat the traffic to get to the plane. And we were in a 15-passenger van, and the guy driving, who was like on the pit crew, reversed, like max speed reverse J-turn handbrake in a 15-passenger van. And I'm in the back holding on and like through a crowd of people, J-turn 180, and then he's just speeding down, and I was like, man, this is different.
Yeah, well, it is different, and that's why we want to enjoy it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but, you know, there was that scene where Pierre Gasly was like, this is the best part of F1, the police escorts. I was like, yeah.
Oh, right.
People forget how ridiculous it is to get these races. Okay, that's your first one in the books. We will have a race preview coming up for you as well. Dan Jimenez. Dan, good first week in the books, man. Thanks for hanging out today again.
Yeah, let's go to Jeddah.
Let's keep it going. For Dan, I'm Alex. We'll catch you next week. Share the podcast. Tell your friends. Teach a neighbor about F1, and we'll get this thing going even further. We'll see you next time, everybody.